Thesis statements. Your thesis statement is probably one of the most important parts of your intro because it tells the reader what you're going to be analyzing. And what it is, it's a sentence that expresses the writer's position or opinion on a particular subject. The reader is going to assume that it's going to be supported by text evidence. So where does it go and what does it include? It's going to appear at the beginning of an essay in the first paragraph. It reveals the opinion that your paper will defend. So whether you're doing persuasive writing, analytical writing, you're writing for history, you're writing for science, if you're doing some sort of paper, you're always going to have a thesis statement. Creative writing you won't, but with any kind of expository pieces you will. It's going to include a subject, some specific aspect of a selected piece of literature, usually the abstract portion of the writing prompt, and then your opinion about that subject. You're always, for the most part, you're always going to have a writing prompt, and you need to be able to dissect the writing prompt to figure out what you're going to be analyzing. So we're going to look at the prompt first. How do you dissect a prompt to figure out what your thesis is going to look like and what you're going to be writing about? So a sample prompt, read the passage carefully. In a well-written essay, explain how the author uses imagery, figurative language, and detail to characterize Scrooge. You want to make sure that you're not just rewording the prompt, because then you're leaving out your opinion. You do want to answer the question of the prompt in your thesis statement. So let's break down that prompt. What are the questions of the prompt? What is Scrooge's character? So you're looking at those characterization, the abstract ideas. Was he greedy? Was he nice? Was he cold-hearted? Was he warm and loving? You're looking at the abstract part of Scrooge's character. The second part of the prompt and what it's asking is how do the literary elements reveal that characterization? That's going to be your concrete. You can look at the paper and see that they're using similes to prove how Scrooge is acting in his characterization. So now we're going to look at some sample thesis. In A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, the author uses many different types of figurative language to characterize Scrooge. So let's evaluate it. Does this answer all the questions? Does it have a subject? Does it have an opinion? So let's think about it. The subject, Scrooge's character in A Christmas Carol. The writer's opinion, though, is missing. There is no opinion given. It just says that the author uses many different types of figurative language to characterize Scrooge. But we don't know how Scrooge is being characterized. We don't know what the author or what the writer is going to be analyzing. So this is not a good example of a correct thesis. So let's look at sample thesis 2 and evaluate it. In A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, the protagonist, Scrooge, is portrayed as the archetypal greedy, cold-hearted character through Dickens' use of figurative language such as similes and metaphors. So let's see if we have the subject and the opinion in this thesis. The subject is Scrooge's character in A Christmas Carol, so we know that that's still there, and we actually have the writer's opinion of what that could be. The reader knows that the writer believes that Scrooge is characterized as greedy and cold-hearted, and that's what we're going to be proving. This is a correct sample thesis. So now it's time for us to practice. Here are your directions. You're going to read the following sample thesis statements and then identify the subject of the thesis statement and the writer's opinion of the subject that is expressed in the thesis. Then you're going to write one sentence that specifically explains what makes each an effective thesis statement. Okay, so practice 1. We have a sample poetry prompt. Read the following poem carefully. Then, in a well-organized essay, analyze how the speaker uses literary techniques to reveal his attitude toward the subject of the poem. So a thesis statement responding to the prompt would look like this. In Holy Sonnet 10, Don's use of personification and mocking comparisons clearly reveal his disdainful attitude toward death. Your job is to tell me what the subject is of the thesis statement, what is the writer's opinion about the subject, and is this thesis statement effective? Write this on your own paper or Google Doc. Practice number 2. Now we have a sample prose prompt. Read carefully the excerpt below, in which the speaker tries to explain his actions to his children. Then, in a well-developed essay, explain how the speaker's language clearly reveals his attitude toward what he is doing. Here is your sample thesis statement. In the excerpt from Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird, Atticus's strong diction and religious references reveal his unwavering belief that his defense of Tom Robinson is both moral and mandatory. At this time, I do want to draw your attention to something. In a thesis statement or in your intro paragraph, you do have to give credit back to the work that you are analyzing. So as you can see here, we have the author's name and the actual work. So make sure that you include that. It doesn't have to be exactly in your thesis statement, but somewhere in your intro. So on this one, you need to tell me what the subject of the thesis statement is, what is the writer's opinion about the subject, and is this thesis statement effective, and why is it effective? So, after you finish this, and you either put it on a piece of paper or a Google Doc, and you've had it checked with me, there is a second practice to make sure that you understand how to make strong thesis statements.